Happy day to everyone. Welcome to the stream Computer Science. We are seeing a series of lectures in the subject Agile Methodologies. We will be seeing a topic on extreme programming. Now, as a contents of today's session, we will be seeing what an extreme programming is and how it works. As well, we will be seeing the techniques that are being used in extreme programming, and we will as well see the workflow of extreme programming, or we can even call it as an architecture of extreme programming. And then we will be seeing a diagrammatic representation of an open workplace environment, and then we will be seeing the roles of extreme programmers and the values available in extreme programming, and then we will as well see who an agile coach is and what does he do in extreme programming, and what are the roles that are being played by an agile coach, and what sort of the regular roles that he plays and what sort of the additional roles that he plays. So, these things we will be seeing as the contents in today's session. Now, as a first part, we will be seeing what XP is. What is XP? We have seen about the basics of agile programming. So, you might be knowing what XP is. Extreme programming, it is one of the methodology that has been adopted in agile software development. So, in agile software development, we have the methodology called as extreme programming, and if you could recall the other methodologies, you have a methodology called as Crystal, you have a methodology called as FDD, which is feature driven development, and you have a methodology called as DSDM, dynamic software development method, and you have a methodology called as Lean, and you have a framework which is called as Scrum. My dear students, what is the difference between a methodology and a framework? Again, a methodology is a model wherein you implement for the process, and a framework, it is customizable, it is tailor made. So, what do you mean by tailor made? What is customizable? As far as tailor made is concerned, we can implement as we go. It is something like on the go. On the go, if you want, we can use it. If you do not want, we can cut certain processes and then we can use it. So, in this session, we will be discussing about the extreme programming. So, here in extreme programming, as it is a methodology, who has developed this extreme programming? Extreme programming was developed by a scientist called as Ken Beck. Along with him, he developed with the support of Martin Fowler and others. I suppose you might be knowing about this Ken Beck. Ken Beck was one of the founder for this Agile manifesto. So, how does this extreme programming works? In this extreme programming, the user writes the tasks as stories on cards, and the developer then estimates the stories. So, he estimates the coding time that is required for each and every story. The user will be given the privilege to choose the set of stories for iteration. I suppose you will be knowing what an iteration is. So, each and every module you have it as an iterations. So, for each and every iteration, for the first iteration, the user will be choosing the set of stories for this first iteration, and then this user, he will be writing the functional test for each and every story, and the code will be written by the developers. The code, after writing the code, it will be refactored. And why do you need to go in for refactoring? Refactoring is done to perfect the design, and the cycle will be repeated until the final system is delivered. So, this is how the extreme programming works. Now, we will be seeing what a customer story card is. So, there are two different story cards. One is the customer story card, and the other one is the story card that has been put up over here, wherein the developers can take and they can estimate the timing. So, let us see about this customer story card. Here it is. So, in this customer story card, there will be a story card number, when you could see this, wherein each and every story card will be having a unique story card number, and then each and every story card will have a unique story card name, and you need to write the name of the customer. Okay. Here, why do I write the name of the customer? For example, if I am going to write the name of the customer as Ganesh. So, why do I write the name of the customer over here? It is because there might be customer as well, there might be customer representatives. Who is the customer? Who is the representative? we will be seeing it shortly. Now, this customer or the customer representative name will be written over here, and then here comes the type of activity, whether this story it is a new story or whether it is a defect that has been fixed. So, if it is a defect that has been fixed, so you need to write it as fixed defect, or whether it is a feature that has been already developed and you are supposed to enhance those features. And then here it comes the failure risk impact. What sort of failures that might be possible, whether it is a high end risk or a medium end risk or a low end risk. So, that has to be noted in the story card by the customer. And then the acceptance, whether it is functional or test scenario or what it is, and if it is a functional test, what sort of number you are supposed to give. So, that numbering we will be giving here. If it is our test scenario, what is the test case number will be denoted here. And then in this end, in which system you are going to implement, what is the date the customer writes the story card, and then what is the customer effort writing in terms of hours, in terms of writing the story card, in terms of hour, how many hours he requires for writing this story card, and then what sort of priority is required. Priority is most important, whether the priority should be assigned as high priority or medium priority or low priority. If it is of high priority, then this story card has to be given more importance, and then it has to be implemented from the first site itself. If it is of medium priority, then it can be privileged actually. If it is of low priority, it can either be implemented this time or it can be put under a backlog and it can be used for the next iterations too. So, this priority has a vital role. And then here, as far as the story description is concerned, it has been classified into three types. One is precondition, other one is story description, next one is post condition, then the generic notes are the remarks, something like remarks. So, as far as the precondition is concerned, what is required, what are the conditions that is to be followed is to be stated in this precondition. As far as the story description is concerned, for implementing this particular story, what sort of precondition is required, and based on this condition, where and all it is being used in the story, that has to be highlighted. Then what is the post condition, that is after implementing the story, what sort of conditions has to be followed for the near future stories. So, those details has to be implemented, has to be written in this post condition, and the generic notes speaks about the remarks. Now, over here to the customer, what is the difference between a customer and a customer representative? A customer, usually the customer, he will be a very busy person. So, you cannot expect all customers to be present along with the extreme programming team. So, what he does is he employs the customer representatives. So, he picks few people, he employs them as representative, and those representatives will be available in par with the development team. So, to the customer representative only gives all the details about the work that has been going on. So, that is the major difference between a customer and a customer representative. In the case of customer representative, he will be a part of the Agile team, he will be part of the extreme programming team, that Agile team that works with the methodology, you call it as the Agile team with an extreme programming. So, extreme programming is a methodology. Now, over to the next slide. Here the user stories. User stories, how are they written? What is a story card? How it has been placed? When you could go to an industry, when you could see the industry, you can see whiteboards. So, in the whiteboard, the user stories will be placed as a sticky notes. So, in the sticky notes, the user stories will be written. So, here is a sample of a user story. So, now it is a coffee vending machine wherein I want to prepare coffee, and I need to, and it should get automated. So, if it is to be automated, how do I going to do this? So, now I suppose everyone knows how to prepare a coffee. So, for preparing a coffee, you know how to prepare a coffee, but you do it manually. Now, you are going to automate the coffee preparing. So, the vending machine, how does it prepares coffee? That is what you are going to see as a user story. We are not going to dictate codings over here in this session. We are going to see only the story card. So, here in the session, the story card, how it is been given, is been displayed over here. Here, for brewing some coffee, what we need to do? If you want to drink some coffee, so the button will be pressed, and when you press the button, the water will get boiled until it becomes empty. Then that becomes a first story card. Then the second story card will become, here you need to keep the coffee warm, and when the pot has coffee in it, it turns on the warmer. When the coffee pot is empty, it turns off the warmer. So, for turning on the warmer and for turning off the warmer, you need to write code accordingly. When the coffee pot is removed, the warmer has to be turned off. So, it will be turned off when the coffee pot is removed. Now, the indicator light, when does it turn on, when does it turn off? So, they turn on the indicator light when the coffee is done brewing. So, turn off the indicator light the first time the coffee pot is picked up. Then how does it get? Supposing if I am going to take the coffee cup from the machine. So, what happens at that time? The interrupt takes place. So, when the interrupt takes place, immediately the brewing the coffee machine, it should stop working. Here is the fourth story card. Interrupt brewing if the coffee pot is removed. Opening the relief valve will stop the water flow. If the coffee pot is replaced, then continue the water flow. So, now from the story cards, what can you infer? You can infer brewing the coffee, that is, here a button should be pressed when boiling the water, right, and then the indicator should be turned on or off based on situations. Then when the coffee is in the warmer, when it is in the boiling stage, the coffee, it should the warmer, the indicator should turn on. When the coffee pot is removed, the indicator should turn off. Then over here, when you are going to take the coffee from the machine, that is, when you are going to interrupt by taking the coffee from the machine, then you are going to replace it. Then the indicator should stop and the machine should also stop. So, these are the scenarios that you have inferred from this particular story card. My dear students, hope you can now understand what a user story is and how a story card is prepared, and then how it is been written. Now, what we will do is, as it is been written, we will be checking, we will be seeing how to estimate. So, estimation and all we will be seeing it in the forthcoming sessions. Now, this is how a story card has been written. Let us see now. My dear students, I suppose you are clear with what an XP is. Who is the founder of XP? Who developed this XP? Kent Beck. Kent Beck, along with the support of Martin Fowler and others. After he could develop the XP, what does he do? We were saying about the users, user stories, and the developer calculates the time based on the user stories, and then he is putting it in the iteration. So, you will get even more a clear picture when we are seeing the workflow of extreme programming or the architecture of extreme programming shortly. Now, let us see what are the techniques that are used in this extreme programming. As far as extreme programming is concerned, we use a very important technique called as pair programming. This is a vital technique. When you are going to write it, you are supposed to write it as in the examination. Definitely you are supposed to, this is said to be a primary technique that has been used in extreme programming, pair programming. Pair programming is a vital technique. What is pair programming? It is a style of programming in which two programmers work side by side at one computer. At a single computer, two people work. Then they continuously collaborate on the same design and logic of code. Okay. How do they continuously collaborate? If there is a single system, if there is two people, only one person will be coding, then what is the role of the other person? So, here it is, when one person is going to code, the second person he will be doing the testing part. When the second person is going to code, the first person doing the testing part. Hope it is clear. What does that you have inferred from the statement? Here in the traditional life cycle model, wherein you would have worked, there will be a separate developer team, there will be a separate tester team. The developer will not involve in testing, the testers will not involve in developing. But here in the case of extreme programming, both the developer he will as well do the testing part, the tester he will as well work into the development part. So, it is a collaborative approach, wherein he will not only do the testing alone, he will not only do the developing alone, but he will do both activities simultaneously, and both of them sit together and they work out. They work out on the same logic of code, but one guy tests, one guy codes. That is how it works. The second technique that has been used is test first programming. What do you mean by test first programming? Before you could develop, before you could write the code, what happens is that you start writing the unit test case. So, you do the unit test first and then you elaborate the coding. The system is tested as it is built instead of waiting till the end of development to test. Usually, again I make a comparison with respect to the traditional life cycle model. In the traditional life cycle model, what we do is, one person will be developing. So, after he develops everything, he will be moving the contents to the production and then he will be moving the contents testing zone. So, there the testers will be testing. But in extreme programming, as far as the technique is concerned, what we do is, the system is tested then and there. Instead of testing at the last, after completing all the development categories, it is being tested then and there. That is why we say it as it has been unit tested. When you write small codes, when you write small modules, when you complete small modules, each and everything will get unit tested. So, that is why it is called as test first programming. So, it is one of the major technique that has been used. Then the third technique, you call it as refactoring. What is refactoring? It is a process of simplifying the design of the existing code without changing its behavior. What do you mean by behavior? Again, my dear students, where have you seen the behavioral testing? Because why I am asking this question is, when you are going to study about this agile methodologies, definitely you would have known about the software engineering, you would have studied about software engineering, you would have studied about the traditional life cycle models, you would have studied about the testing phase. So, in the testing, you would have seen two types of testing. One is called as the black box testing, other one is called as the white box testing. Now, which testing is called as the behavioral testing? The black box testing is otherwise called as the behavioral testing. Why is it so? What do you do in a behavioral testing? In the behavioral testing, the behavior of the program, the behavior of the software is tested rather than the code. The code is not tested, the programming part is not tested, only the working functionality of the software is tested, and that is the reason we call it as behavioral testing. Here again, in the case of refactoring, it is a process of simplifying the design, the elaborate design, you simplify it. Why do you want to simplify it? Because even in extreme programming, unlike Scrum framework, even in extreme programming, you give small releases. So, when you are going to give small releases, you are going to refactor it. So, you are going to simplify the design. So, the design is being simplified without changing its behavior. The design will be simplified, the coding will be simplified, the length of coding lines will be minimized, but the working feature the working of the software will not be simplified. So that is called as refactoring. So refactoring is one other technique that has been used. Then the other technique is collective ownership for on-site customer and collective ownership. Okay, what do you mean by collective ownership? When do you have a ownership? Who is the owner? What do you mean by collective ownership? If you are going to make a success, right? If you have developed a software and when you are going to say I develop it, how will you say? Will you say if you are in a team and the team has developed a software? Now, will you be saying it as I developed it or the team developed it? Always it is the team success rather than the individual success. If it is a failure made by successfully, if you are going to develop a software, you call it as team success. In the case of failure, if the software gets failed because of a particular person's code, what do you say? Is it a single person failure? Even here, everyone in the team will take the responsibility. That is why it is called as collective ownership. So collective ownership means even if a single person makes the mistake, it is the team's responsibility that as a team everyone will take the responsibility for the failure. As a team everyone will take the responsibility for the success of the code. That is called as collective ownership. Then on-site customer. What do you mean by on-site customer? All customers, they cannot be present all along with the team always. That is the reason these on-site customers, they deploy and they employ the customer representatives. So when there is a customer representative, the customer representative, he will be acting as a bridge between the customer and the development team. So he is the person who will explain everything to the customer. So if anything goes wrong, it is of the collective ownership. So this is also one other technique. So now let us see the workflow of extreme programming or the architecture of extreme programming. Now my dear students, you may be knowing what a user story is. So here the stories, the user has written certain stories, the stories are placed in story cards. Here based on the user stories, the requirements are given, the developer will be calculating the estimations and then he will be sending it for release planning. So when he is going to send it for the release planning, what happens is that as people might be knowing, the developer might be knowing how to estimate, he will be knowing the what sort of amount that is required. Such estimation you call it as confident estimate. And there is one other estimate which is called as uncertain estimate, which happens due to certain untoward incidents. So supposing if he does not know, some errors may happen due to untoward, so which will result in spikes. So when it is going to result in spike, again he will re-estimate, that becomes a confident estimate, then it goes over here, that is called as a release planning. Now based on this release planning, a release plan is formulated. Now it goes to the iteration. Iteration is one which has been something like a looping. So wherein here the coding you will be doing. Now based on the iteration, a patch or a version will be given. So okay, will it be released? No, not at all. It will be sent for the acceptance test. Who has to accept it? The customer has to accept it. Okay, supposing the customer is not there, who will accept it? Customer or customer representative. The customer representative or the customer has to accept it. So based on the customer representative, he will be sending it to the customer and finally the customer will be giving approval, then the small releases will be released. Now supposing if some error happens during this acceptance testing, what does it mean? If it is happening in the development scenario, my dear students, you would have studied in your software engineering, in software testing, if the error happens in the development scenario, what is that error called as? It is called as bug. If it is going to happen, if the same error, if it is going to happen at the customer environment, at the customer's place, how do you call that error? You call that error as defect. Since it is happening in the development environment, you call this error as bug. So, now the bug comes in. So, again iteration goes on, again latest version. So, based on the acceptance, what happens? It goes to the next iteration. So, this is how it works. So, how does it take place? Scenarios are created based on the user stories. So, that is how it has been put as test scenarios are created based on user stories. So, this is how this is said to be the architecture of extreme programming or the workflow of extreme programming. I repeat in a faster manner. Here you have the user story, and here what is this architectural spike? It happens if there is a flaw in design. If there is a flaw in design, you have this architectural spike, and then you go to the system metaphor. Then you have the user story, you have release planning, based on some spikes the estimates are being handled, and then goes to the release plan, then goes to the iteration, then based on iteration latest version is developed and acceptance test is made, the customer approves, it goes to the small releases. So, this is the workflow of extreme programming. And let us see the open workplace environment. So, this is the open workplace environment. So, this is how the pair programming goes on. Here two people are sitting on the same machine, one guy test, one guy. So, it is a open environment. So, they are all sitting in a lethargic manner, but they are all committed towards the work. So, this is how the work takes place. Now, let us summarize whatever we have seen in this session. What did we see in this session? We saw about what is an extreme programming, who is the founder of the extreme programming. Founder of extreme programming, Kent Beck, and how does extreme programming works. Now, what are the techniques that are being used in extreme programming? We saw a very important technique called as pair programming. Then we saw about the workflow of extreme programming or the architecture of extreme programming. Then we saw a picture of the open workplace environment. Thank you.